this relationship has been dating back since 4 decades ago. But a lot of changes has been taking place since 3 years ago, especially with ASEAN, with its ASEAN community. And for EU, it sees ASEAN as the key towards its Asia strategy. It seeks to deepen and broaden its relationship with ASEAN. It's not like the relationship has not been established that strong. In fact, EU is ASEAN's second largest trading partner at 238 billion euro in goods and services traded between two regions in 2013. Besides that, EU is the biggest provider of foreign direct investment in ASEAN. EU play a major role in development, being the major development partner of ASEAN and the biggest donor to the ASEAN Secretariat. EU is also stepping up its engagement on non-traditional security areas. It is an active member of the ASEAN Regional Forum, have been working together to enhance crisis response and disaster management, as well as humanitarian assistance. EU also focus on high-level dialogues on maritime security cooperations, tackling transnational crimes, human rights, as well as port security. Pushing the relationship to the next level, EU is seeking to propose a joint communication to the European Parliament and the Council. I will be interviewing His Excellency Ambassador Luc Vandebon, Ambassador and Head of Delegation for European Union to Malaysia. He will be sharing with us on this joint communication, as well as explain to us on why the EU-ASEAN partnership will be a pivot towards this region.
Monday Morning Matters.
Perspectives
from Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Grace.
And of course, you are with us at our show where we talk about issues in Southeast Asia.
Right.
This time it's not just the Southeast Asia we are talking about. We are talking about the European Union. When you talk about ASEAN partnership with other countries, usually you would think about the US, China, Japan, but
or India.
or even India, the emerging countries.
Yeah.
But seldom we think about European Union.
And then there are lots of sort of saying that ASEAN is a wannabe.
Wannabe of the EU.
Yes, exactly.
And what comes to your mind when you think about EU? Grace?
It sounds very structured to me when I think of EU.
Like, you mean rigid structure, or it's like organized structure?
Organized structure. Yeah, I'll go for the positive one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, for me personally, when I think about EU to ASEAN, I always think about its stance on human rights, which is very much something that we need in Southeast Asia. But we are not just talking about human rights. We are also talking about its partnership, especially the idea of a single market.
Right.
That's the reason why right now we have His Excellency Luc Vandebon, Ambassador and Head of Delegation of the European Union to Malaysia, to explain to us EU's proposal to scale up its partnership with ASEAN. Hey, hi. Shall I call you His Excellency?
No, please call me Luc.
So tell us more about this particular partnership, which is called the Joint Communication to the European Parliament and the Council, the EU and ASEAN Partnership.
I'm impressed. Thank you very much. Well, you provided me with your initial discussion amongst yourselves a very good starting point, basically. You're correct. We are not very much or very well known in the region, and people usually are not aware of our relationship, the relationship that already exists with ASEAN, the European Union ASEAN partnership. It's underrated, but we're very, very much there. People tend to forget that, for example, in the latest figures that we have that are complete 2013, EU, the European Union, was ASEAN's second largest trading partner.
Right.
For a combined trade in goods and services of 236 billion euro. We also, in that year and years before, have consistently been the largest provider of foreign direct investment to ASEAN.
The largest.
The largest. In
See, people do not know about
No,
this.
that's why I'm very, very grateful to you that you give me a platform to say this again. So I think close to a quarter of all the foreign direct investment that comes into ASEAN comes from the European Union. And nevertheless, all of that, people tend to forget who we are. We are a dialogue partner of ASEAN since 1972. ASEAN has a lot of very important dialogue partners, but it only has one dialogue partner that, just like ASEAN, is an exercise in regional integration. ASEAN and the EU are the two single largest regional integration projects in the world. ASEAN at the service of 600 million citizens, we 500 million, that's 1.1 billion citizens if you put the two of us together, and therefore I think that it is only logical that we are interested in each other and that we can look at each other, see how we can learn from each other's accomplishments and mistakes, and try to provide better services of integration to the benefit of our citizens.
My biggest question that I'm quite curious, because you mentioned that EU is one of the largest funders and EU has been a dialogue partner since the 70s, right?
72.
But why only now you're setting out the communication partnership?
Oh, well, we've had various documents that are had been discussed with ASEAN and the EU in various formats, underlining the importance that we have for each other. But there, specifically the last 2-3 years, there has been a reinvigorating of the relationship and of the thinking in Europe as well as in Asia about where to go with this partnership. At the last ministerial, the EU-ASEAN ministerial in Brussels in July last year, EU and ASEAN ministers decided that it was time to look at how we could lift up this relationship and give it a more strategic character. The document that was produced on the 18th of May, which, as you so eloquently said, is the joint communication to the European Parliament and the Council, joint meaning joint, the European External Action Service and the Commission services, with the title The EU and ASEAN, a Partnership with a Strategic Purpose. Response is the response to this request from the ministers in July 2014, and provides a first step in thinking about how we could ultimately lift this partnership up to a strategic partnership. And we have a strategic interest in ASEAN for a number of reasons. Not only because but definitely also because ASEAN is a very fast-growing economic trade investment area. If you put the 7 countries of ASEAN together now, the 10 countries, you are the 7th largest economy. Projections are that by 2050 this would become the 4th largest economy. We know, our businesses know, that we have to look beyond Europe for our own economic and business future. And what better region to look at than ASEAN? So we definitely have a strategic interest from an economic trade investment viewpoint, but also from a political and security viewpoint, because we find it
it's still a young regional grouping in a way.
It's still a young
lot of issues that is dealing with that maybe can learn from the EU.
Well, I think that we can learn from each other. One of the things that the second part, besides economics, trades and investment, is political and security aspects. And ASEAN has positioned itself very central in this robust security architecture that is now more and more taking shape in the Asia Pacific. You only have to think about the ARF, the ASEAN Regional Forum, where the EU already plays an important role as well, but also the East Asia Summit. So these are aspects that are for us very important: stability, security, predictability, economics. So there are a number of reasons why, from a strategic point of view, we definitely are interested in ASEAN and ASEAN in us, because ASEAN would like to see how we tackle a number of these issues, also security issues, at a global or regional scale, since the integration of ASEAN leads to this. So, and we are gladly...
this partnership will go beyond just trade and investment.
Absolutely.
It will be comprehensive.
Yeah.
In the past, when EU deal with ASEAN on various issues, how it does it?
Well, we have various...
Let's say issue on South China Sea, or issue on human rights, or even trade.
Well, those South China Sea non-traditional security issues are basically one of the most novel new dimensions of our relationship. We very recently in Kuala Lumpur held our second high-level dialogue on maritime security cooperation. We had the first one a year and a half ago in Jakarta, I think. With very active participation of a number of the ASEAN member states to look at issues such as port security, piracy, exchanges of information and data, intelligence gathering and all of that, which shows that we are stepping beyond the traditional economic, trade and investment issues. Human rights is still extremely important for us. Within our human rights campaign projects, basically, one of the most important campaigns is the anti-death penalty campaign, and I know that you hosted not so long ago Toshikazama, who we invited here to assist us with our anti-death penalty campaign. This is something that we will always continue to do. This is something that is very close to our heart, and that we will always pursue to do. We also are going to participate, I think, towards the end of this. No, I think next week there is a regional anti-death penalty conference here with a lot of support and cooperation of the ASEAN Intergovernmental Human Rights Commission. So this is something that we are looking forward to participate in again. Besides that, in the non-traditional security sector, we have had meetings on disaster preparedness. We have the centers of excellence on biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons. There are a vast number of issues. Counter-terrorism, for example, is another one. Countering extremism is another one. There are lots of immigration issues where we exchange information about how we tackle issues like that at a regional level, which is something, again, that we hope ASEAN can learn of from our mistakes as well as from our accomplishments. So there are a lot of possibilities and great potential.
Actually, a lot of overlapping issues that EU and ASEAN shares.
Absolutely, because of the nature of what we are. Also, we are, as I said, the two largest regional integration projects.
We'll take one short break. When we return, we will discuss more on EU-ASEAN partnership.
Monday Morning Matters.
Perspectives
From Southeast Asia.
Hey, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Grace.
And of course, you are still with us and with our guest of today, His Excellency Luke Vandebon, Ambassador and Head of Delegation of the European Union to Malaysia, but he wants to be referred as Luke.
Wonderful.
So, just continue to this discussion on this joint communication partnership. What's unique about it? Why do you think that ASEAN needs to be interested in it if you want to sell this idea to ASEAN?
Well, again, a number of issues. I'm very happy that it came about, this communication, because again it gives us an opportunity when we advertise it, when we send out the press releases, to underline the importance we already have for each other, EU and ASEAN, which is, as I mentioned in the beginning, vastly underrated. And secondly, I think that us venturing into areas that are not traditionally embedded in cooperation agreements like this is new, is novel. You know, the non-traditional security areas that we are now working on together with ASEAN and exchanging information are extremely important. We just last week, in the beginning of this week, time flies when you're having fun. We had the visit here of a 4-star general, General Patrick de Rousier, who is the chairman of the EU Military Committee, which is the highest military body within the setup of the EU institutions, who participated in the Asia-Pacific Roundtable conference here, which just wrapped up now.
Yeah.
I had a very interesting and useful courtesy call on the Malaysian Chief of Defense in areas that we were not thinking of, or that we thought we were not able to think of 10 years ago, that are now part and parcel of our cooperation.
Why do you see there's a trend towards more regional partnership, or at least partnership on issues that traditionally people don't really talk about, especially issues that concern the national security of a country?
Well, because they go beyond the national security of a country. You know, when we're interested, we received these questions from the media and from individuals before, when we had our high-level dialogue on maritime security cooperation. Why are you interested in maritime security in this part of the world? You're in Europe. Well, this part of the world, the seas here regularly see transiting, 50% of the world tonnage shipping comes by here. We live in Europe from import and export. So obviously we're interested in stability and security and predictability of this part of the world, because it affects whatever goes wrong here affects us in Europe. So
right now, between EU, ASEAN trade and investment, what is the volume? Is it one of the is EU one of the highest trade partners for ASEAN?
Absolutely. We are the second largest trade partner, with a total bilateral trade in goods and services in 2013 of 236 billion euro. That makes us the second after China. And ASEAN is, for us in the EU, our third largest trade partner after the United States and China. So we are very important trade partners, extremely important.
Yeah,
trade
for
partners.
sure, both EU and ASEAN been sharing a lot of challenges and success together. But I have a question where it comes to AEC. How has EU been supporting towards the ASEAN economic community? And do you think, my personal question, do you think it's achievable? Because it will be concluded by the end of this year, and a lot of mixed feedbacks is coming from, especially from public and the fee organizations. And
even businesses.
Well, what the AEC here you can compare with what we have in Europe, the single market, which in the economic area we find is one of our largest, not only in the economic sphere, one of our largest accomplishments and most important accomplishments. We find that the single market is not finished. You know, it's something that needs continuous control and management and tweaking in the right.
Started this quite some time ago.
Absolutely,
in the 70s.
decades ago. Yeah, but it's a work in progress. Therefore, it all depends on what do you understand by finishing the ASEAN Economic Community by the 31st of December 2015. I think it's never finished. You might have finished a set of rules and regulations or so and have put them on paper, but then the implementation and the continuous refreshing and reorienting and tweaking to whatever comes up in the world needs constant attention. So how did we support that? We have from in the beginning, from Malaysia's chairmanship of ASEAN, mentioned to ASEAN to Malaysia at various levels, various ministries and agencies, that we are there to assist, to provide information, exchange data with them on our accomplishments and failures and whatever, so that they could learn from that if they want to. Don't want to interfere.
Right.
Everybody, you have the ASEAN way to go about things.
Yes, the ASEAN way.
Like we have the European Union one.
Talking about that, I mean, completely different are the EU structure and the ASEAN structure, which is based solely on consensus, while the EU is quite organized since the beginning of the discussion, in a way that you even have your own parliament and you have committees that solely focus on how to integrate the economies. How can ASEAN even learn from EU when it's like comparing apples and oranges?
Well, ultimately you want the same thing, and we thought that the purely intergovernmental setup based on complete consensus did not work for us. If it works for ASEAN, fine. We very strongly believed in the necessity to create very strong institutions to which the member states give a lot of competencies out of hand, basically. They transfer competences to the EU institutions with the idea that the institutions are going to be the guardians of the treaties and that they are going to make sure that whatever the member states give them mandates for will be implemented. That's very different than the ASEAN setup. You have the ASEAN Secretariat, I guess, with an annual budget of $16 million or so, provided in equal parts by the member states. Our budget, to be quite honest, I don't know exactly how much it is this year, but it's considerably bigger.
It is.
Because it also has to keep alive all the institutions, obviously. So yes, the setup is very different. The institutional organization is very, very different. But you have your own reasons to do it the way you have set this out. That doesn't mean that you are not going to be able to accomplish your ultimate objectives. This is all in your hands. And if you decide that this is the way, with you, I don't mean you, to you ladies. If ASEAN thinks that is the way they should go about it, then that's fine. And wherever we can provide assistance or help or share information, we are very, very happy to do so. Again, we are the only regional integration project as a partner of ASEAN. All the other partners are very important too, all the other ASEAN dialogue partners, but we are basically the same setup. Institutionally we might be different, but we're a group of countries that see closer cooperation, that see benefit in integration, in economies of scale. There's no other ASEAN dialogue partner that has that to offer. So we're
doing well.
We're banking a lot on this special nature of our relationship.
Right.
We will take one short break. When we return, we will play a short clip on EU-ASEAN as natural partners in the global world, as well as we will continue the discussion with His Excellency Ambassador Luc Vandebon on ASEAN connectivity and EU's interests in this region.
Monday Morning Matters.
Perspectives
From Southeast Asia.
Hi, you're still with us at Durian ASEAN on our Monday Morning Matters, discussing on the EU-ASEAN partnership. One of the areas that ASEAN is looking intensively is on ASEAN connectivity. A lot of infrastructure projects are going on around each of the individual countries in Southeast Asia, and many times they would look at who can fund their project, and of course naturally they will look at the ASEAN Infrastructure Investment Bank, and of course the existing ADB and World Bank and all that. But for you yourself, like representing the EU, how does EU look at ASEAN connectivity, and how does it assist ASEAN to grow its infrastructure so that it can support a single market economy?
You're very right. I mean, connectivity is fundamentally important. We call it, maybe we have different terminology in the EU, but it all comes down to the same thing. You want to connect people, businesses, institutions, and that's how it's going to work. And there's an infrastructure dimension to that, but there's also very much a policy dimension to that. We have dedicated, I think, about half of our support, 170 million euro, to the ASEAN Secretariat. About half of that, 85 million roughly, is directly linked to connectivity. We are looking at an EU-ASEAN civil aviation setup. We are looking at ways to combine member states, because people tend to forget that too, that it's not only the EU institutions budget, that we also have 28 member states who are very interested in this region for bilateral reasons, who have money to offer in order to make this region succeed, which is in our common interest. We have the Asia Investment Facility that we can tap into, and we have various other sources of financing that we would like to share with ASEAN in order to make this connectivity work, because it's all about connectivity. When you think about regional integration, that's basically what it is, what it comes down to. So this is for us a very important part of the regional project, of the regional setup, and that is also why in our recently published communication to the European Parliament and Council, connectivity takes up a substantial part in there, and we are really looking forward to working together with that, with ASEAN on connectivity aspects.
I always wonder, when it comes to communication between ASEAN and EU, how transparent is it in terms of communication? And then when the plan is set, how is it like to see the whole picture of execution of the plan so far between EU and ASEAN?
Very transparent. We're an open book. We have a European Parliament. Whatever we do is automatically made public. You know, for example, if we negotiate FTAs or whatever, everything is shared with our stockholders and our stakeholders, and our main stakeholders, civil society and the Parliament. So same thing goes for our relationship with ASEAN, with China, with the United States. Everything is basically put on the table, and we have no qualm whatsoever or no inhibition to share and to be as open as possible, obviously with the partner with whom we are discussing.
Coming to that, so what's the update on the ASEAN-EU FTA?
Well, we had the visit. We were very lucky this year. Besides the general who I just mentioned, about a month ago, we had the visit of Trade Commissioner Cecilia Malmström here in Kuala Lumpur. She attended the ASEAN Economic Ministers / European Union Trade Commissioners annual consultations, and I was lucky to be able to attend most of the discussions between Commissioner Malmström and her 10 counterparts, economic ministers of the ASEAN member states, and this was an issue that was discussed. And specifically, since it was Commissioner Malmström who proposed that before the end of the year, the ministers should ask their senior officials to organize a stock-taking exercise on 3 issues, basically. The first one is where we are with our bilateral EU-ASEAN member state FTA negotiations. You know, we concluded with Singapore. We're negotiating with Vietnam and making a lot of progress. And we have negotiations at a certain point of stage of advancement with Malaysia and with Thailand. So look at where we are with those. Secondly, look at in how far the ASEAN Economic Community is making progress, because as I said, this is very important to link the single market with something comparable like an ASEAN Economic Community. And thirdly, look at the added value of a region-to-region FTA. And all this to be fed in back to the ministers in order to see if we can pick up where we left it or at another stage. In 2009, I guess, when we stopped with the EU, the first attempt to have an EU-ASEAN FTA. So there's progress. I mean, we're not saying that we're going to have a next round of negotiations, but the interest was very clearly there during the AEM.
I suppose
EU.
just like the TPPA and RCEP, is a new venture. You know, talking about economic trade partnership is something that for ASEAN it needs rounds and rounds of discussion. So we just keep on getting updates from you.
Well, they're very complex and complicated issues, and there are a lot of sensitivities involved. And again, when we got, for example, for the EU Malaysia FTA, when we got the mandate from our president of the Commission, Barroso, at the time, and Malaysia from Prime Minister Najib in October 2010, to conclude these negotiations, not only start them, but conclude them in 2012, in 2 years, we kind of knew that I was a little bit over ambitious and optimistic, because it's difficult. You know, that would happen as good as never, that you start and conclude something like that, as complex as an FTA, specifically with the level of ambition that we want to put into these FTAs. We want to have everything on the table, everything needs to be discussed, and everything needs to be useful and beneficial for all of us. We don't want this to be an empty document. We want it to be something that concretely generates benefits for citizens, ultimately, of both sides.
I guess this is also one of the challenge, the modern way of doing business compared to in the past. It would just be like geographically related regional grouping, or through the WTO. But in the future, it seems to be more like the whole world, but based on whichever clubs that you want to be in.
Yeah, well, we are multilateralists, the EU. We very strongly believe in the central role played by the UN system, and in terms of trade, that means the WTO. So that's why ultimately we were very much in favor of concluding the Doha round. That run into some difficulties. So then we said, well, okay, we have to do compliant with WTO rules and regulations anyway, whatever FTA you conclude. So let's go for the regional then, if we cannot do it more at a global level. And that's why we were interested in an EU, with this part of the world, EU-ASEAN deal, rather than what we are doing now, EU Singapore, EU Vietnam, EU Malaysia, EU whatever, because ultimately all these individual FTAs, there's a lot of work involved, basically, to be compliant with the same thing over and over and over again, because it all needs to be WTO compliant. So we used to have a trade commissioner at the time, Pascal Lamy, who always said, afterwards he became the Director General of the WTO, but when he was our trade commissioner, he always said, I will never contribute to this spaghetti bowl of bilateral agreements. We were the only ones, regretfully, who were thinking along those principles, and we had to step off our fence because everybody else was happily concluding bilateral agreements and we were left out. But we always have said these bilateral EU, in the context of this region, EU Singapore, EU Vietnam, whatever, FTAs, when they are concluded, they are building blocks, stepping stones towards the bigger ultimate prize, which is an EU-ASEAN deal.
Anyway, we'll take one short break. When we return, we will focus more on the area regarding on the human rights of the EU-ASEAN partnership.
Monday Morning Matters.
Perspectives
from Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Welcome back, this is Grace.
And of course, you are still with our guest of today to talk about EU-ASEAN partnership, His Excellency Luc Vandebon, Ambassador and Head of Delegation of the European Union to Malaysia. So let's talk about human rights, because it's also part of the major challenge of EU-ASEAN communication partnership. And when you talk about human rights, EU have done a great work in creating awareness on anti-death penalty, but the recent events, especially the events of refugee crisis and the boat people, as well as human trafficking, are these areas in particularly concern EU as well towards ASEAN?
Well, there are issues that concern us because we are fundamental supporters of human rights, and the rights of refugees and migrants are part of that. We have our own issues to deal with in Europe, but that doesn't mean that we are only parochially looking at what is happening in our part of the world. We would like to help out where we can in other parts as well. And that's why in the context of this new communication, we would like to step up our dialogues and our partnership with the ASEAN Interinstitutional Commission for Human Rights, notably on issues such as the plight of migrants and refugees. So this is something that is of a big concern to us. This
and it's also an issue in Europe as well, especially the boat people
absolutely,
issue.
Yeah. So we have various different ways to deal with it and to go about it. Ultimately, what it comes down to basically is what is happening with the individual refugee who is stuck somewhere on a boat. But what do you do with the person? It's all about the humanity dimension of the whole thing. It's not about politics. You know, very often politics take over, and you tend to forget that it's basically all about pure, nothing else than plain humanitarian concern that should be at the forefront of all the discussions that we have about that. But it is very interesting. Also, when the general I referred to earlier was here and had his bilateral with the Chief of Defense of Malaysia, this was an issue that was briefly discussed. You know, how we tackle or try to tackle or deal with the immigrant migration trends in the Mediterranean, coming from the Mediterranean. I mean, they're not exclusively from the Mediterranean. In our case, very often the Mediterranean part, the little boat trip, is the last stage in a very, very, very long trip for migrants that come from the middle of Africa or so. So there are various issues to look at this. There are various aspects that come into play, you know, coast guards, military, politics, economic, find the root causes, human trafficking. These are all aspects that we would like to find a better way to dialogue and discuss with ASEAN and to exchange experiences and best practices and learn from each other.
So far, the discussion only takes place between EU and ICHR. Is there any other platforms and avenues that you try to promote?
Well, we also look at individual countries. I mean, we have delegations, European Union delegations in 9 of the ASEAN member states. I think the only country where we don't have a physical presence as such is Brunei, but Brunei is very intensively dealt with from our office in Jakarta, and I'm sure that my colleagues in the other member states of ASEAN are doing the same thing as I do here, and that is also talk to the authorities at bilateral level about how we take care or try to take care with varied success about our own issues and see how we can learn from each other. But I mean, in the context of the human rights dialogue that we have with ASEAN as such, migrants is an issue. As you mentioned it before, one of our most important campaigns in the region is the anti-death penalty campaign, and therefore we're very happy that somewhere at the end of next week we have this regional anti-death penalty campaign, that is conference that is going to take place here in Kuala Lumpur. So we are going to try to intensively participate in that as well. There's the rights of women and children, We would like to see very much another visit of the EU representative for human rights come back, in the region. He was in 2013 and 2014. He visited member states of ASEAN. I would personally really like to have him over here.
Right.
All my colleagues would like to do that, so I'm in competition with the rest of them. So there are a number of issues that we like to cover under our human rights.
It's quite
cooperation.
widespread as well.
It's widespread.
Yeah. So we are towards the end of our show, but just to know, like, what you foresee personally as part of EU in terms of how this partnership will blossom into, because in the next 5 years, especially Malaysia is going towards the Vision 2020, and for ASEAN itself, it's foreseeing itself in the post-ASEAN 2015 as this region where it's kind of like EU but not quite. But how do you foresee this partnership will somehow influence ASEAN towards the direction that you think it would somehow achieve?
Well, first of all, it is not our intention to influence ASEAN's direction. You have, as I said, you have the ASEAN way, you have your own objectives. We just want to help you realize that, because we very much would like to see a strong, self-confident, robust ASEAN, which will contribute to stability and security, economic benefit for all its citizens and for the rest of the world as such. We very much want to have discussions with ASEAN on the post-2015 vision. Now it's all about accomplishing the ASEAN Economic Community by the end of the year.
Right.
But I know that ASEAN is also working on what is going to happen beyond that and beyond 2015. We would very much like to be a part of that, because this region is very important for us. We think that the communication, the document that is basically the reason why I'm here, that was published the 18th of May, is going to be endorsed. We hope that it will be endorsed, because this was a communication to the European Parliament and the Council of the EU. There will be a Foreign Affairs Council meeting on the 22nd of June that will issue, as usual, Council conclusions. And I very much hope that these Council conclusions will endorse the recommendations in this document, adding also maybe the individual member states' desiderata as to what they would like to see from a bilateral point of view in their relationship with ASEAN, to reinforce the whole document and become even more strategic and in nature, in such a way that we can turn this partnership in a real strategic partnership.
This partnership between EU and ASEAN, it may sound very ambitious, but then I guess it comes with the patience and the commitment. But after all, as the citizens, right, we really want to see those plans come to reality, and we feel it, that not only it's just the relationship between these two initiatives, organizations, but it also comes to our reality, that we feel it.
And coming to that, actually, I do have one question.
Right.
because when it comes to EU-ASEAN partnership, and one of the area, of course, is on human rights, and a lot of dialogue is happening between ASEAN and EU. But do you foresee, is EU pressuring ASEAN on key humanitarian issues such as the recent persecution of Rohingya by Myanmar government, and ASEAN lack of proactiveness to voice out its concern because of the non-interference policy that it has?
We do not want to interfere.
Right.
We will tell everybody who wants to know it or who doesn't want to know it what we feel about these things, but this is an issue that is happening in ASEAN. We will gladly provide whatever expertise we have with the issue that is on the table, but we will never try to interfere and tell other people what they have to do. We can just give our opinion and tell people, or try to make it clear to people that how we tackle certain things in the sphere of human rights are maybe interesting looking at, and maybe interesting to to take note of for what happens in their own region. So we are not going to impose anything on anybody, not at all. The Rohingya question is a serious issue that has raised a lot of concern, not only in Europe, also in the United States and the rest of the world. The plight of these people who are basically stateless is very disturbing, and we really think that a solution will need to be found. I know that in the case of Malaysia, you make a distinction between political refugees like the Rohingyas. When they arrive here, they cannot be sent back to a country because they officially don't have a country, and economic migrants, which you will process and then try to send back to the country where they came from because they do have a country. So that doesn't really solve the issue of what are you going to ultimately do with the Rohingyas that arrived here. And I think that this is first and foremost an issue that needs to be tackled at regional level here, but where ultimately the international community has some kind of responsibility too, because it's all about the individuals, and we have to be solidary with our mankind, with our brethren and sisters. Obviously, this is extremely important, and that is also why I think it is very important and a very good theme for that was chosen by the Malaysian chairmanship of ASEAN, this people-centered ASEAN, that people get involved in this, that people get a sense of what is going on, that it is not just institutions or governments or politicians that are talking to each other about very important things such as the EU-ASEAN relationship, but that ASEAN citizens know that they belong to ASEAN and what it stands for. We have exactly the same issue to deal with in Europe, and that ultimately you have more a linkage between the citizens and the people than exclusively at the higher up level, government level or so, where it all goes way above the heads of the normal citizen who has no clue what is going on. So this is difficult, and we have difficulties doing that in Europe. I keep on telling we are our own worst public relation agent. We do not manage to explain to our people the benefits they reap from belonging to something like the European Union.
I like the self-criticism. It's lacking a lot in ASEAN.
And I think the same thing would be useful to look at more intensively from ASEAN. You know, if you want my 5 cents of common sense.
With that, thank you very much.
Thank you.